Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of this new podcast I'm doing called Tattle Table, where kind of just it'll mostly be me talking about stuff that's going on in my life or things that have happened, and occasionally we might have some special guests. Who knows? I would like to keep this going. I would like to have this not fizzle out and just forget about it completely, even though this might just be for my own personal thing, but it's still something I wanted to do. So, just to start, I'm Greg. If you did not read my bio because you hate me and you don't like me and you think I'm ugly and stupid, my name is Greg. And I'm a junior at the University of Kentucky. This isn't for a project or anything. This is something that I wanted to do personally. And for those watching the video, this is not going to be my scenery all the time. It's not going to sound this good all the time. We're just lucky. We got an audio booth today. And yeah, there's not just kind of just it's gonna be me talking about my life. So one of the first things I'd like to talk about is how I flunked out of college my first year. Yay! Who's excited to hear about that? I know you are. Yeah, that's right. I can hear you. I can see you. I know you're excited. So anyway, I started college here at the University of Kentucky in around 2020, fall of 2023 is when I started, and I was 17. I graduated high school early, and I think that is something I recommend. I liked it. I'm glad I graduated early. However, I did not graduate with my friend group, which has ruined my life a little bit. It did at the time. So, kind of just going into college on your own, you kind of don't really have a good sense of responsibility. So, I mean, I had been working up to this point. I understood how, like, oh, you need to be on time for things, and oh, you need to be on time for school, or your parents are going to yell at you. That was really the only thing keeping me from going to class because your parents are going to fuss at you. They can't fuss at you in college because they don't know what time you have class. So it led into after fall break, I kind of just did not go to class and would just go to work instead. And at work, I would tell them, oh, I don't have class right now. And that was a bad idea. Don't do that. But I would, pretty frequently just not go to class in the mornings because I had an 8 a.m. And I recommend to anybody in this world who has an 8 a.m. class and you are a freshman or sophomore, don't do it. Just don't. And I'm saying that as a freshman and sophomore who had 8 a.m. classes and did not go on the repeat. I just would not do it. And well, as a junior now, I have 8 a.m. classes, one of my favorite classes ever, but as a freshman, you are not going to want to go to those at all. A lot of people don't. That is where your grades falter. And as someone who got a C at midterms on one of mine, I was just like, I don't care. I really don't care. So I just didn't show up anymore. And that led to me getting an E, which is bad. That is like an F. That is a bad, yeah, that is an F. And kind of led to me in my fall semester getting a D and an E, and then just multiple C's. And then I was on academic probation. And then I was like, well, I'm on probation. I don't even care anymore. I hate this. I'm single. I hate this. My life sucks. So why don't I just quit caring? And then I quit caring. And I tried to kind of pick up the slack until I got a thing in spring of 24 that said I was on academic suspension for a term and a half. And I tried to appeal to see if I could get back in for fall of 24. They said no. So I think that crushed me to the point of I just gave up and there was no return because I couldn't live on campus anymore. But my roommates didn't like me. And I was just like, well, what's the point on living on campus? So in May of 24, I packed up out my dorm, moved back home, and it was just kind of a mess because now looking back, I would never in my life do that again because that was stupid and I was being stupid. And I hope this isn't echoing because I hear it echoing in the headset. So if it's echoing for you, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, actually. So I'm just like looking back now, I can't really. It's just, I'm not like, well, this sucks. Why'd I do that to myself? This is my own fault, because I did it. I did it. It's my own fault. So I went to EKU for a year to kind of pull myself back together. First semester, I did bad. Again, I got another D. That wasn't good. It was really bad. But second semester, A's and B's, spring of 25. So I went through the messy, terrible process of trying to get re-enrolled back in this university, which is a nightmare. However, if you have good people supporting you, they will help you. As in, before my my admissions appeal letter got rejected, I had the guy called me and said, "You need to redo this." And I was like, "Okay, thank you. Thank you for telling me that before I embarrassed myself." So after kind of I appealed and I waited and I not negotiated, I just kind of hassled and tasseled, and I was like, and they're like, okay, you're back. I was like, biggest like relief, biggest breath of fresh air I've ever taken was seeing that email, and they were like, okay, you can come back, and I was like, but I'm thankful and unnecessarily thankful for everybody else. I'm also thankful for figuring it out and figuring out how to do it, and also you know, one thing that kind of, like influenced during that time was finally getting diagnosed with ADHD, which I never thought I had. I didn't think I had it. I always kind of haggled on the fact that I was like, oh, I do not have ADHD. But when it came to the point of I was, went to see a psychiatrist and she had asked me one question, and then afterwards she said, you just spent 45 minutes talking about some one side question I asked you and you turned it into your whole life story. And I was like, okay, you didn't have to clock me like that, but I really appreciate you doing it anyway, and I feel embarrassed now. But then I started Adderall. So I think there was a positive correlation to that because, after starting Adderall, I was kind of like, and it's not one of those things where it's like, because I know some people view medications like Adderall and other like amphetamines that are for ADHD management, kind of just as like oh, I'm gonna have so much energy and like I'm just like I'm boosted, like I'm energized to get all my work done. That's not how they work. And I know a lot of people, typically, there's like a lot of misinterpretation about that, what I think, because as someone who's been on them, for at least I've been on for like the last year and a half, and I'm kind of like, I have never had an experience like that, and I wish I did. It's just starting, and even now I've switched from like Adderall to instant to Adderall extended to Vyvanse and have settled on that because depending on when you're seeing this or hearing this, it is January of 2026, and Adderall extended has been on back order for the last 4 months, so I had to switch to Vyvanse. However, besides the point, it's just kind of led into a type of like, it made me feel better. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not energized. I'm never energized from it. I'm exhausted right now from the night before, even though I took a Vyvanse this morning. It's just my head is clear and I'm able to get focused on things that I want to do. Say I'm like, oh, I don't want to do my homework, but then I start on it, and then I'm like, oh, I can actually finish this up in one sitting instead of I'm getting distracted and I'm kind of just going on a tangent and not getting anything done, which is not good. So I would have to say, stuff like that is helpful. I will say I tried a brief stint on like something, what is it, Stratera, atomoxetine, for those who know. Uh, I work in a pharmacy. Could you tell? Could you tell I worked at a pharmacy? Could you tell I'm gonna go to pharmacy school? Could you tell? Wow, I said the generic and brand name. You're proud of me, aren't you? Thank you. This is for me. Rose is for me. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You didn't have to. Anyway, back on track. Um, a certain thing I kind of just did not react, well, didn't really react at all to non-controlled medicines, which I don't like. I don't like having to be on stuff like Vyvanse and Adderall because it's something that it's hard to break away from in the near future, which is something I'm like, I don't want to have to be on that for my whole life. So hopefully I'm like, once I'm at a point where I'm just doing work, then I won't have to consistently take it anymore, and maybe it can kind of be as like a PRN base or on as needed basis. So then it's like it's just something I do not want to have to be attached to for the rest of my life. Now, speaking of dropping out of school, let's go back to that topic. Back in April, at the end of the semester in April of 2024, we're going to start talking about a weight loss journey. So, at the end of April 2025, I weighed about 279 pounds. I was binge eating because I was struggling with, the fact that, oh, I flunked out already. I might as well just commit to the bit. And then I just kind of stress ate and like gained so much weight very quickly. And even, starting college too, I was a bit more heavy set because of high school. But I was a little bit more confident in my body back then. And then kind of getting into college when you see a lot of people, especially kind of just being a gay male in college is a difficult thing, especially when you're not necessarily, I'm not going to say not attractive because, look at me, I look fabulous, but when you're not the ideal body type, going into college as a gay male is something that is so, it can be like detrimental to your mental health because when you're in college for the first time, you're going to be on these apps like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge, and sometimes you'll not sometimes, most of the times, some will branch out to Grinder and stuff like that. And getting into the mindset of people only want you for your body, people only want you for your looks. That's something that's kind of like debilitating in my head because that's something that can kind of just, at some point, like, not going to say it's going to ruin your life, but you're going to notice things. Like, you're going to notice those things. You're going to notice, oh, I tapped this guy and he didn't tap me back, or I liked this guy on Tinder, but he didn't like me back. And then those things can kind of start sitting in your head like, oh, does he not like me because of this about me? Does he not like me because of my weight? Does he not like me because of my looks? Am I too outgoing? Am I not outgoing enough? A lot of those things, a lot of those insecurities start to get you in college. And, going back, I'm not just saying it's not just gay men that have this experience. A lot of anybody. And I just, specifically from my experience, I just want to highlight on like the LGBTQ community because there is a lot of, there's people that are very outgoing and will be outgoing and will kind of get shamed for it. And especially like I used to, I'd say freshman year, I was a little bit more outgoing than I was now about like, being necessarily like proud of myself and being. What was that? Did you see that? You didn't see that. My laptop charger died. Guys, this is not funny. Okay, never mind. Hold on, everyone. The laptop is charging now. Okay, we fixed it. Just kind of, but yeah, especially I used to be a lot more outgoing. And yeah, looking back at myself, I wish I kind of kept the confidence that I had as a freshman because as a freshman, you're going in from high school just assuming when you're in high school, especially at my age at 17, I was not on dating apps and stuff like this. I was not on apps that like help build connections, and I'm putting that in quotes with other people because kind of just apps like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and it's apps like Grindr, you're kind of just most of the people on there in college are just wanting a physical connection. Now, not all, because I've dated some great people from Hinge and from Tinder, and it was, amazing. They were great relationships. However, the majority of it is going to just be wanting you for your body and wanting you for quick little hookups or wanting you for just the most minute amount of emotional intimacy or in physical intimacy, and then that's it. Which I kind of believe I'm not necessarily someone that supports hookup culture, not just because it's like, oh, you're just jealous. I'm not because that's just not something personally I would want to participate in, and especially looking forward or kind of just looking back as I've been working in healthcare, that's not something I necessarily want to participate in because the amount of like medicines that get dispensed, and it's like, oh, these are like, I'm like, pick up on that. I'm like, oh, this is HIV med. Oh, this is like post exposure doxy, and I'm like, this is not stuff that I want to be. I don't want to have to be scared of having something happen to me if I'm having intercourse with somebody, and that's not always the norm, especially looking towards things like, you know, just using protection. That's an easy thing to do, but it's not always guaranteed, and especially it kind of depends on the person. Where you could look on someone's profile and they say, "Oh, can we please, go unprotected?" I'm like, "I've tested clean. Let me show you my test." And then they say they are, and they show you proof that they are, but you could still have a hookup, have sex, and come up with something. Like that happens to a lot of people. It's not difficult for someone to lie about that. So it's kind of like even I will gladly say it's like anytime I've been in a relationship with somebody and the first time we have intercourse, like I will still would like to get tested just to make sure no one's lying to me. Because if someone's lying to me, that's an immediate, like, we're gonna have a very serious issue because kind of just a lot of the hookup culture is just quick and go, and you don't have enough time for conversation to get into that. Like, hey, if we're going unprotected, like, are you safe? Do you promise to use safe sex practices with me? And that's kind of just something I'm not necessarily not gonna say not in support for because you do you, but also that's not something I particularly engage in just because of the health risk of it. And, I just like, I consider myself to say I care about my health enough to not, I don't say that people that hook up don't, but I consider that I care about my health enough that I'm not going to be doing stuff like that. And, getting back on track to the completely unrelated back to the weight thing. Um, in April of 2024, I had left the university, worst of my life, at 279. That was an abysmal time. After the stress eating and everything, I had started because I was, feeling also just sad because I sucked. Uh, uh, Medication, bupropion, Wellbutrin, and that was just something I thought was going to curve because a doctor had said it's going to curve the binge eating. It did not. It did not curve the binge eating. I stayed pretty stagnant. And, at the time, I roller skate for a hobby. I've been doing that since freshman year, since October of 2023, and I was still doing it frequently at the time, but I didn't go as much because, it hurts to do it when you weigh that much and you're putting enough like pressure on your joints and your bones. It is difficult to do that consistently. And kind of just not getting exercise and everything, it kind of put me in a state where I was just like, I don't want to do anything here. I feel terrible. And it gets to the point where I got to adopt my doctor, and I'm like, okay, something's got to change. So it's about, I want to say April of 2025 at this point. It's been a year, and I'm still kind of I'm pretty much in that same space around 270, between 270, 280. And I'm like, my mom at some point had done Manjaro and Wegovy, and I was like, can I try this? Because I cannot lose weight, and I have tried. Um, and she was like, no, first thing we'll do phentermine. We did phentermine for a little bit. It was great. Awesome. I was never hungry, except I was getting dizzy because I just didn't eat that much. And I lost a good amount of weight. I lost about in a month, maybe like 15 or so pounds, which is a little bit much. But then I had started Adderall, so I couldn't keep doing that. So then we were like, okay, we'll try Wegovy. I'm going to reel up in close and personal and tell you this. I hate Wegovy. I hate Ozempic. I hate any semaglutide injection. The amount of sickness I felt constantly, I just could not eat. Genuinely, I could not get anything into my stomach without it just making me feel terrible. I wasn't, getting sick. I just felt it was constant. Stomach, food in me or not, I'm nauseous constantly to the max. Like it just does not stop. And that is not something I wanted to feel. So I did that for a month, hated it, took a break for another month or two, and then, it gets back to time where I'm back in school and I'm like getting, like tuition refund. So it's like July at this point, and I had just started working in July, and I had just started working at UK in their farm at the UK healthcare. And I was like, okay, Zepbound dash Manjaro, same thing. Tirzepatide is $650 a month. Let's try it out 1 month. And then I lost 22 pounds in a month. I don't know how I did that. I was eating too because I just, I am a very avid supporter for Zepbound and Manjaro because if you don't know Zepbound and Manjaro, it's the same thing. It's tirzepatide. It's a dual GIP and GLP-1 agonist, so it's doing Ozempic's job and something else. It's doing something else. Glucagon, insulin peptide, or something like that. I think. I'm not necessarily sure. I don't remember. But switching to that genuinely made my life so much better, and it's like I do realize now that I have experienced an unhealthy amount of weight loss, and I have kind of toned it down a little bit because I want to build muscle back because I went down from at the start of the school year or in July I weighed to 262, and by the end of December I'm down to 212. And that is one insane and a lot, but it's something that I'm like, oh wow, I feel good about. And that's kind of what sucks is that the cost about it because insurance isn't going to cover it if you're not diabetic, and I am not diabetic. However, Wegovy's always an option because it's only $150 for the pill now. Yay. It one side tangent that I'm going to have to pull up on a website on my computer because there's this company that's doing like GLP-1 pills. However, the problem with that is that it's like, okay, so I'm gonna get mad. GLP-1s only come in there. It's either pill or injection, and the only options are, because those are not compounded. Semaglutide compounded is not FDA approved, and you should not be taking it. Tirzepatide compounded is not approved, and you should not be taking it. Compounded, the combination of semaglutide and tirzepatide is not FDA approved, and you should not be taking it. That is not a Federal Drug Administration tested and approved medicine. There's a reason that it's expensive. It should not be, you should not be paying for anything that's under about, the Wegovy pill right now is about $150, but stuff like Victoza and Saxenda, liraglutides, those are about $100 on certain like formularies. That is the minimum an injectable should be costing. Stuff like Trulicity and like dulaglutide, which is Trulicity, and Manjaro and Zepbound, those all cost within the like four to $600, $700 range. And Ozempic on some formularies is $300. With the discount card, it's still within the hundreds. You should not be paying less than that. And I'm not just saying that just to kind of upsell it. I'm like, it is not FDA approved. The only pill FDA approved is the Wegovy pill, which is semaglutide, and Rybelsus, which is also semaglutide, it's typically for diabetic people, but off-label it can be used for weight loss. Rybelsus and Wegovy are the only FDA approved oral semaglutides. Injectables, the only ones approved are Wegovy and Ozempic. Those are the only options. Because, and I see a lot of people, and I have had people call my pharmacy and like talk about like, hey, like, is there any different? Because like this is like I'm not feeling good because they're taking compounded GLP-1s, and I'm like, that's not. These are not like these aren't things we should be taking because they're not FDA approved. And I understand, I know some people, don't necessarily agree with like I'm not going to get into that because I know some people just don't necessarily agree with the government. I understand that. But still, just because you don't agree with the government doesn't mean that it's not trying to help you. Because, and people like us in the pharmacy, you have any questions about a drug, go ask someone at your pharmacy, go ask anybody at your local pharmacy. You don't have to like do not you don't have to go to Google. Google can sometimes give you the answer, but it's not always going to give you the answer because there are companies out there that I really do not like that are trying to do like GLP-1 pills that aren't like FDA approved, and people can get sick from those. People do get sick from those consistently. And it's like those aren't approved. The only companies uh that are selling, like GLP-1 medications is pretty much, it's just, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is just Novacare, or not Novacare, Nordisk, Novo Nordisk. I'm trying to go through here on our website so I can, pull up an example for everybody here. But that is the only company because they make Wegovy, they make Ozempic, I'm pretty sure, and they make Rybelsus. Those are the only semaglutides available. Eli Lilly makes all the tirzepatide medications. That is the only company as of January 2026 that makes it. Those are the only two. And I believe there are generics of liraglutide, which is Victoza, and that I understand. There are generics of that. That one has been out there for a while. However, these other ones, there are not generics of. There shouldn't be generics of. There's stuff like I do not believe there's a dulaglutide injection that isn't a generic either. And I'm fact checking. I'm fact checking this for you because I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie on here and say that, this is something that you shouldn't be taking when it's something that's completely fine. But there is no generic of Trulicity either. That patent expires in 2027. You should not be getting anything like this because it's just like I don't want to tell you what to do. That's not what I'm trying to do here. My point here is trying to educate, and that's something I always try to tell any patient that has a question about it that I get asked. I'm like, I'm not trying to just push for you to, buy this expensive medicine. I'm trying to tell you that what you're getting is not safe for you. Because there will people that will call and say that I've had this experience at one of the retail pharmacies I float at, and I have heard people say, like, on the phone, oh, I'm not getting, this is just not something, like, it's not making me feel good. Like, I'm feeling sick after taking this. Do you know what's going on? And they're like, okay, I'm not a and then let me preface this. I'm not a pharmacist, nor am I a student pharmacist or an intern. I am just a certified pharmacy technician who is in a pharmacy bachelor's and graduates next year and will be going to pharmacy school. However, with enough, when you work in it enough, you have enough ability to answer questions. I will say, I give advice. I will give like advice. I'm not gonna give you a straight answer, but I can direct you towards the correct way. And I have had somebody call and say, hey, like, I've been feeling really sick. Hey, what are you taking? I can look up the side effects for you. And they're like, oh, it's the compounded Wegovy Zepbound shot. And I was like, you should not be taking that. You should report that to the FDA because that's not good for you. And she did report it, and her doctor, she did go to her normal doctor and have them like she's a patient with us now, and it's just kind of that's something I like. I like that I was able to, give some advice against doing something that's going to be damaging to your body because after doing it all the time, I'm very in favor of injectable shots and like just any weight loss medication. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing. I think that they are very beneficial if you persist diet and exercise after, which is what I've kind of been up to. I will miss a week or every now and then, but I will still make, effort towards I'm going to still keep my diet the same, and which is eating less, and I'm going to like still keep exercising frequently. There's still stuff that you have to be doing consistently to maintain that weight loss. And I think that's why a lot of people don't like it. It's because when you get off of that, that's not something that can, you have to still have the willpower and that mental strength to be able to continuously not like, falter off of it. You still need to be able to maintain that weight loss after the fact, which is, that's something I'm a big truther of. I'm like, you should be able to maintain stuff like this. You should be able to keep it up. And, kind of just that's what kind of makes me in support of it. Now, one thing kind of like not necessarily hefty thing I wanted to discuss real quick, but one thing I've written like three papers over this already, is I am personally in support of things not Ozempic because there's stuff with the medullary thyroid carcinoma and multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome, but I am very hefty in support of Zepbound. Let me specify Zepbound and Mounjaro, tirzepatide's the potential use of it in, adolescents that are obese. And let me clarify, when I mean adolescent, I mean 14 and up. I mean 14 to 17. And kind of one thing I've been doing, I have written papers over, I just believe if, let's say, for example, I have a child who has had trouble eating their whole life. It kind of reflects on me because I was a very picky eater and I kind of still am. I'm trying to work on that. But my parents did not really force me out of it necessarily, or they tried. They did try forcing me out of it, and I give them credit for that, but I struggled at it. And kind of one thing I was very in support of is having these medications for patients that are between 14 and 17 because, you know, it's like I do not think I would have lost weight without it. I tried and tried and tried, and I could not do it. And at the time, I had just turned 18 and 19, but I really think I'm like, this should be something that is allowed for these kids because it's I'm not necessarily sure how to explain this deeply, but if you're um or at least what the requirements I had said for it. I said, and direct quoting from a paper, and I will list the sources in the description, that youth aged 14 years and older with a body mass index of above 30 which is 30 kilograms per meter squared, are at elevated risk of metabolic dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stunted bone growth, and psychological stress, which I'm very heavy on the psychological stress because when you are in the ages of freshman to like freshman, senior in high school, you are going to be, and I know this applies to middle schoolers too, but just based on age, you will be heavily focused on your body image. Your body image is one of the main things that defines you, just in well, in your own head. One of the main things that defines you all throughout high school, because that's something that everyone sees. It's something that everyone's going to see about you, and it affects you, like critically affects you, because you're thinking about, oh, what am I gonna? Sometimes a lot of people, and it's like just that body image issue is causes a lot of eating disorders. And I understand I'm not going to go out on a limb here and say that, like, oh, skinny people don't get eating disorder. Yes, they do. A lot of people, anybody can get an eating disorder, and it's very easy to have something like that happen. I know a lot of people. I have been on the binge eating disorder because I did not like how my body looked. I didn't like how my body looked, and instead of, trying to be proactive about it, I chose the I'm going to stress eat about it, and which made it it snowballed into getting worse and worse and worse, which is something that like I do not like. I do not like that that happened, and I kind of, looking back, I 100% like regret it, but it's nothing I can do about it now. Just kind of I believe that, younger people should kind of just be, you don't need to have that type of focus on your body image. But when you're at a weight that's like over, when you're hitting like class one, class two obesity, and you're still within like, and you're still an adolescent, your metabolism and everything, it's still developing, but you shouldn't just be told, in my opinion, just to, oh, I believe it's the 5-3-2-1, like the healthy plate thing. You shouldn't just like, that's not just the only thing you should be following, with like regular diet and exercise changes. I think that the use of something like Manjaro and Zepbound would be good, just because it's like, I believe if you're letting 18-year-olds use it, then I think like it would not be that much of a stretch to stretch it down a little bit. And kind of, I'm also quoting back a paper that I wrote, kind of just direct quote from here. And a randomized controlled phase 3 trial in children and adolescents aged 10 to 17 with type 2 diabetes showed major improvements in HbA1c and BMI over 1 year, including a BMI reduction of 12% and an HbA1c drop of 2.2%, which is, for a young person significant because young people are eating a lot of sugar. And when your A1C drops like that, that's something that can get you out of diabetic range, because dropping from, I believe I'm not positive on what hits pre-diabetic range, but I believe it is A1C. I'm going to just go ahead and check here because I do not want to prove anything wrong. Um, yeah, pre-diabetic A1C is between 5.7 and 6.5%. So let's say you're within that range and you are able to over a year drop it from like 6.2 to 4.2, which is something that happened to me. My A1C was a 6.4 in April of 2025, and after my last labs have been done, it is down to a 4.8. That is something I do not think I would have been able to do without medication, just kind of based on like the whole diet and as well. It's just something that was incredibly difficult for me, and it's not saying, I'm not gonna say that I won't be reliant on medication for a while, because I don't think I will. Just kind of, it definitely pertains for certain people, but personally, I have been able to break out of using it for a while. Like, I'm able to take a week off or 2 weeks off and it not critically affect me. And I know you shouldn't be skipping. Do not skip doses. Like, if you miss your dose, if you are up to 3 days past your dose, you should be talking to your doctor about that. But in my case, I kind of just roll with the punches, and it's just something that like I've still been able to manage. I've been able to manage my weight past that. And I think just and I kind of just want to break off of this too into insurance coverage with weight loss medications, I think is ridiculous, because the fact that you are denying your patients that, for example, for me, I have to pay out of pocket. It was $6.50 a month, now it's $4.99. So thank you, Eli Lilly. Really appreciate it. However, um, the fact that a lot of insurance companies don't cover it because they just don't. I'm not necessarily sure why. I can't even give you an answer because if I if I'm a doctor and I have a patient who is, let's say back to the point that I was a 5'5", 18-year-old that weighed about 280 pounds. And when, diet and exercise are like kind of working, but not really, and other medications aren't working, and there's contraindications, I would be trying to get them approved for a GLP-1 or like GLP-1 antagonist or agonist. So the fact that a lot of insurance companies just don't cover it because they just don't want to cover it for weight loss. It's not necessarily just for weight loss. There are lots of comorbidities that can be linked with that, like lots of major like cardiovascular diseases or like this that's kind of what I'm mainly focusing on. A lot of cardiovascular diseases and stuff can pose up from that if you are at a consistently unhealthy weight for a long time and a lot of fat buildup. And diabetes eventually can, like, if you keep up your eating habits and stuff like that and your A1C continues to climb, you can hit that diabetic mark and it is hard to turn back. It is difficult to turn back, to just stop being diabetic once you become diabetic, because your body has built up and it eventually it causes an issue enough to where your A1C shoots up. And I just kind of, that's just something I don't understand, because I believe if I were an insurance company, which I know they're not necessarily nice at all, I just believe, for an insurance company to deny someone medications like that is ridiculous, which is especially in my case too, because I'm not just saying it for my own sake, because just because I like need to lose weight and I don't want to pay the money. No, it's because I have family history. About a good amount of people in my family on my mom's side and my dad's side all have type 2 diabetes, and my mother has congenital heart failure. This is not stuff I want to affect me later on in life, so I'm trying to fix my weight and stuff now, because, having that, I do not want that to be affecting me later on in life. That's not something I want to deal with, so I'm trying to fix my weight now. But the fact that an insurance company won't cover the medications to prevent that in the way that they want is a little bit ridiculous. A lot of insurance will cover stuff like atomoxetine or Strattera, which is it's an ADHD med, but also I have seen it been used for binge eating disorder. They'll cover stuff like phentermine, but with patients with like counteractions with stuff like that, like for me, I can't take phentermine because I take a daily uh prodrug version of an amphetamine, so I can't, because it's getting I will have an amphetamine in my system already, so I can't stack them on top of each other. And I have had previous non-success with other stuff that was meant for binge eating, which will also, Wellbutrin can be used for that as well. And having that still not get covered is just kind of something I find it's just ridiculous. I think that should be something most insurance formularies should cover for all patients. I mean, oh, okay, well, I guess this is gonna have to be audio only for the rest of for this last second clip, because the video cut out. So I just think, you know, apologies. I just think, kind of coming to a close, that's just something that I think a lot of insurance companies should be kind of getting on, making sure they need to want their patients healthy and not just have to continuously buy medications from them. So, um, I guess that is all I have for you today. Thank you guys for watching or listening. I really appreciate it. And we will hopefully be back soon with an episode 2. So long.